Welcome to the Worth Knowing live stream. I'm Matt Robison, and today I want to connect a few dots that have recently popped up on America's radar. And when you do, they start to form a picture of something we've never truly seen to this extent in the United States before. Big money, huge amounts of money from corporations and from the exploding elite segment of American billionaires, taking direct control of our government and driving monumental decisions about what direction we take as a country, where our resources go, what our laws are, and who those laws apply to. This is not just putting a thumb on the scale for preferred candidates, but throwing away the scale and picking the candidates, or becoming the candidates, or becoming unelected senior government leaders who then channel government money and power back to their affiliated interests, which further enriches them, which only increases their grip on American government in a cycle that's getting increasingly hard to interrupt. We have an outstanding guest today that I'm going to bring on in just a moment to talk about the kerosene that got this fire going, and that has continued to be an accelerant. But I first want to lay out just a few of those dots. One change is the incredible rate at which we've been minting new billionaires and other ultra wealthy Americans. The number of billionaires in the United States has grown exponentially from just 13 in 1982 to over 900 by last year. Beyond them, the share of U.S. wealth owned by the top 0.1%, that's not the 1%, it's 0.1%. So that's people who have about $60 million or more of net worth, has grown 59% in the last 4 decades. By the end of 2024, the bottom half of households in America, 66 million of them, had $4 trillion of combined wealth. America's billionaires held about $8 trillion in wealth, almost double. And yes, I know I just threw a lot of numbers at you, so we should probably give our usual disclaimer.
Nerd alert!
It was my understanding that there would be no math.
I don't even know what that means.
No one knows what it means, but it's provocative.
The point is that fears that the wealthy exert too much power are as old as the Republic. And it's been a recurring theme in more modern politics, from Al Gore's slogan in the year 2000, the people versus the powerful. That's a real thing. You can look it up. To Bernie Sanders' much caricatured refrain about millionaires and billionaires. But until very recently, the actual number of millionaires and billionaires and the amount of actual money they had at their disposal to funnel into politics was relatively small. Now it's not. Back when I was a congressional chief of staff and ran campaigns, you would definitely make big donors a cornerstone of your fundraising strategy, but you were fishing in a relatively small pond. Not anymore. The second dot that we should connect is how much of this incredible wealth is flowing into politics. A New York Times analysis that ran just yesterday revealed that in the 2024 election cycle, almost 20% of federal campaign donations came from just 300 billionaire families. Now, when Al Gore was running for president and saying he was all about the people versus the powerful, the share of money going into elections from the powerful, from billionaires, was just 0.3%. So it's risen 60-fold in the last quarter century. Let me tell you, as a reformed campaign manager, that when a fifth of all the dollars out there are coming from 300 families, that's 300 phone calls you have to make. You have to pay attention to those donors. I mean, sure, you could ignore them, but there's a natural selection effect here. The candidates that solicit and line up with the billionaires get more funding, tend to be more successful. And the ones that ghost them or run against them don't. It doesn't take that many cycles before your political class starts to reflect the priorities of your billionaire class. But that's just a simple version of it, because the New York Times also shows that in many cases, the billionaires are simply flooding races with so much money that they're essentially picking the winners. And that's particularly true in mayor's races and state legislative races and school board races that just don't cost that much to buy. And even that's just the light version, because in some cases, the billionaires have decided to skip the middleman and become a candidate themselves, or just colonize the government by joining the senior levels of the Trump administration. 12 of his current cabinet officials are billionaires. They have like $500 billion of wealth. And that's to say nothing of the other ultra wealthy or relatively wealthy people with strong corporate ties that Trump has brought into key layers of the administration. And that's where the third dot comes in, because ProPublica just published an investigation into the web of financial ties between Trump officials and the industries they help regulate, in which they looked at more than 1,500 Trump appointees, including former lobbyists, industry executives, and at least a dozen officials who declined to identify their former clients at all. In just one example, Steve Feinberg, now Deputy Secretary of Defense, formerly ran Cerberus Capital Management, which owns companies receiving Pentagon contracts tied to the $151 billion Golden Dome missile defense project. And he still has ongoing relationships with Cerberus. Corrupt as hell? Of course. But it also speaks to the connection between individual wealth and corporate wealth and how all of that money enters into a flywheel that makes the rich richer and gives them more assets to pour into politics, which makes them even richer. And it also connects to our fourth dot, the Epstein files. I'm not going to dwell on this one. We've talked about it plenty. But I would argue that the biggest revelation coming out of the Epstein files is not that Donald Trump is in them, or that he appeared more than 1 million times in them, or that his Department of Justice tried to black out his name 950,000 times. It's the bigger picture of the elite wealth ecosystem where financiers, tech executives, politicians, academics, and celebrities mutually backscratch their way to benefit themselves in ways that almost all of us can never access. And that brings us to our final dot. How did we get here? Yes, we have a lot more wealthy people and a lot more politically active corporations than we used to, but we also have a legal construct that's enabled them to so brazenly funnel that money into politics. I want to read you a quote from that New York Times story. The increasing influence of the ultra-wealthy in U.S. politics has troubled Mark Roscoe, a former Montana governor who served as chair of the Republican National Committee in the early 2000s. He recalled an era not long past when donors were reluctant to contribute too much to political campaigns to avoid being perceived as purchasing influence. And because the law imposed limits on individual donations. Now, he said, the country is on the verge of becoming a place where the wealthy people are able to spend millions of dollars to essentially direct how the government runs without breaking any laws. Quote, does any reasonable person on the planet think that's appropriate? He said. What changed in the law was a set of decisions commonly referred to as Citizens United. So I want to start with that final dot and work our way back through the rest of the story with today's guest, Tiffany Muller, the president of the advocacy group End Citizens United. Tiffany, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me on today.
I'm thrilled to have you. There's never a good time for this topic,
Never.
right? We're
Never.
overwhelmed by war and the economy and the Trump outrage du jour and whatever thing is splashed across our screens. And yet this is sort of the background app running across our politics and our government that's been slowly draining it of its function and its vitality. I want to start by asking, you've been running End Citizens United for a decade now, by my count.
It's true. The gray hairs show it. The gray hairs show it.
Oh, you got a ways to go to catch up to me, my friend. Is something fundamentally different now in terms of between massive wealth, either individual or corporate, and political campaigns and our government? Has something really changed?
I mean, the sheer size and scope and scale of the problem today is unlike anything we could have imagined 16 years ago when Citizens United was decided. And we knew it was going to be a really horrible decision, right? And for all the folks listening who don't know kind of the simple take on Citizens United, it was a January 2010 Supreme Court ruling. And it was decided in a 5-4 ruling with the conservative majority, saying that corporations are people and money equals speech. And basically what it allowed for the first time in 100 years is for corporations to be able to spend unlimited money to influence elections. That then got expanded out to individuals being able to expend unlimited dollars to help elect candidates. And we've seen really the rise of both super PACs and special interest and billionaires taking over our system. Some of this we could have predicted 16 years ago, but the sheer size and scope and scale of both the money, but more importantly, the gridlock, the dysfunction, the corruption, the breakdown of the fundamentals of our government. I don't think that even 10 years ago, when I started in Citizens United, that we really had a sense of where we were going to end up today. I don't think that we could have foreseen all of that. And so you were talking about some of the changes, and I think we can look at any issue that people care about and begin to break it down to how the money in politics, how the billionaires and how the special interests are really driving the policy outcomes around those issues.
Could you just help me clarify a little bit as you kind of do that level set about what we're talking about here? I referred at the outset, I'm not nearly the expert that you are, to a set of decisions that are commonly referred to as Citizens United. That's sort of the shorthand. But as I understand it, there was a follow-on ruling called speechnow.org
That's right.
versus FEC. That's the one that created super PACs. That feels to me like sort of the kill shot in this assault on democracy. Am I misreading that?
No, you're not. Citizens United is kind of the shorthand we use to describe the system that we are currently under. But it was both the Citizens United decision and the Speech Now decision and subsequent decisions since then that all kind of go back to Citizens United and this idea around not being able to regulate the amount of money being spent in our elections. That is the real problem, and that set up this system that we're currently in. So we need to overturn Citizens United. We also need to end super PACs, and there are lots of ways that we can do that. But they're both short-term and long-term goals that we have to have as we fight this problem of just the sheer influence of money in politics. And if you really want to get totally dorky, because I loved your clip and I am here for the nerd alerts, Citizens United also relied on a decision from the 1970s called Buckley v. Vallejo, where they actually talked about money equaling speech. And so there's also some issues that we have to like go all the way back to the 1970s about. But look, we came out of the Gilded Age in the late 1890s, where we had an oligarchy running this country, buying influence, literally buying US Senate seats. And the people stood up and fought back, right? And we had the birth of populism and the progressive era, where we saw the increase of labor unions and constitutional amendments. And another piece that was in that was actually getting corporate money out of our elections. And that is one of the things that was successful for the next 100 years. And so as I think about what we need in this moment to really fight back, it is a kind of similar take to what we did and what we saw be successful coming out of the last time we had this much concentrated power and wealth in our country.
I want to build on your historical reference because I could see, not necessarily now, because usually we get quite a number of dissenters in this live stream. Some of them are bots, some of them are trolls, some of them may not even be domestic bots. I like my bots to be domestic. Why are we outsourcing this industry too? Damn it! Come on, China, play fair.
This is good jobs for our people. Come on, we can do with bots as well as anyone else.
Yes, there are AIs who are in need right now. Won't you think of your local neighborhood AI before you outsource your bots to Putin? But I could see people saying like, well, Tiffany, you just kind of admitted that this has always been a feature of our system. And I disagree. I think that there is a palpable difference. And to me, the difference here is this has never been so far out of
That's
the
right.
closet and out of the shadows. And
Yeah.
there's even a kind of a historic parallel that one could draw to an ostensible democracy or republic and this amount of oligarchical control, blatant oligarchical control of power. You can find historical analogs in ancient Rome in the Senate
Mhm.
or in the Medicis of Florence. There are some historic examples, but I think it's fair to argue, even in the Gilded Age, that never before in the history of any ostensible republic have we seen this kind of thing. And yet I could still see dissenters saying, okay, Matt, sure, but why ultimately do I really care? I happen to agree with Buckley v. Vallejo. I happen to think that speech is an untrammeled First Amendment right and that money equals speech. So could you push back on our behalf and kind of lay out the case for why should people really care about this? Like, why is this bad?
Well, the reason they should care the most is because it's hurting their life. And what we have seen is like whether you're Democrat, Republican, independent, most people think that there's way too much money in our politics. And most people think that it means that their voice has no power, right? And we've been seeing this for at least 20 years in our democracy, where the people continue to feel like they are being left further and further behind. And they're working harder and harder, but their access to the American dream, their access to that ability to work hard and to get ahead and to have their children have a better future than they had is becoming unattainable, right? And it is creating a system in which they feel like there is no hope. And when you have a system, a democracy, a republic, where the people feel like their voice doesn't matter and there is no hope and there is no possibility of being able to actually move forward in their life, that is when you see real uprisings happen, right? And so we should be scared. But here's the other reason. I think most of the people I talk to are really concerned about energy prices right now. They're really concerned about grocery prices. They're really concerned about the price of buying a house. They are concerned about their prescription drug costs. Things feel more and more out of reach. But guess what? Corporate profits are at an all-time high. CEO pay is at an all-time high. The tax rate on corporations and billionaires is at the lowest it's been in what, 60 years, 70 years, something like that. These are policy choices that are being made, and they're being made on the backs of the people, right? We had the ability to actually expand the Affordable Care Act's premium subsidies to help make sure we kept tens of millions of people on healthcare. There was a choice made in Congress to cut that in order to give the biggest tax breaks in US history to billionaires and US corporations. Are you kidding me? Like, these are policy choices, and it's happening for the reason that you laid out at the beginning. It is happening because you have 300 billionaires giving 20% of the total election spending in our elections, and then advocating for the lowest tax rates that they've ever had. It is selfish, it is greedy, and it is happening on the backs of people day in and day out. I think I could have kept going. That was really, I really got going there. Sorry.
No,
about
you should. I mean, and it's, I find it hard to connect the dot. I mean, look, I think one of the most misunderstood statements in American history was Hillary Clinton's basket of deplorables comment, which was taken as, shitting all over anyone who happened to have an interest in Donald Trump. I don't think that's what she meant. I think
Agreed.
that what she meant by deplorable is people who are immune to reason, argument, facts, who are unwilling to consider other opinions. And we try to not engage too much with people who aren't even interested in having the conversation. What I find hard, though, is engaging the people who potentially would be willing to open their ears, but are Republicans. You tell me, you must run into almost exclusively Democrats dealing with this. Is this an entirely partisan issue? Do you have real allies in the Republican Party who consider themselves constitutional conservatives and who really care about this?
Well, here's the problem is that the only place it's partisan is here on Capitol Hill, right? Like, out across the world, Republican voters, Democratic voters, independent voters are all on the same page. They all think Citizens United should be overturned. They all think there's way too much money in politics, and they all feel like those with concentrated wealth have concentrated power in our country. And they're all right? Like, they are not wrong. And up until just the last 15 years, these issues were always bipartisan. I mean, if you look at the last major campaign finance changes that were passed in 2002, it was the McCain-Feingold Act, right? And it was led by both Democrats and Republicans in both the House and the Senate. The Voting Rights Act It was the last time it was reauthorized was 2006 with a vote 96 to nothing in the Senate. Nowadays, you can't even get a single Republican to co-sponsor the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act. So this is about money, but it's also about access to the ballot box. It's about other fundamental foundational elements of our democracy that right now the Republican Party has decided that if they continue to rig the system so that they get more big money into the system, they will win more elections. And why do they feel that way? Well, because actually the billionaires are giving a lot more money to Republicans than they are Democrats, about 5 times more going to Republicans than Democrats. Corporation spending is geared toward Republicans instead of Democrats. So oil and gas, for instance, spends almost 300 million every election cycle, with about 90% of that going to Republicans. So sadly, on Capitol Hill, this is a pretty partisan issue. Now, we have seen some other anti-corruption and ethics pieces like a stock trading ban, which we fully support and are in favor of, be bipartisan and actually get support from Republican legislators as well. But when it comes to like really tackling issues around the money in politics, the disclosure and transparency, securing access to the ballot box, right now those are sadly partisan issues because the Republican Party has decided that basically they have to have a rigged system to keep winning elections.
I will say this is conspiracy Matt putting on my hat for
I like
just
conspiracies.
10 seconds. Yeah, I'm going to cover up my gray for a moment to say, normally at this, I even warned you about this before we jumped on together. It's like, look, we get some dissents and some of them are trolls, but we get some dissents in here. And I have to say we're getting none, which makes me awfully suspicious about what algorithmic throttling this is undergoing as part of a live stream on YouTube owned by Google. I shouldn't say those things out loud because there's probably some kind of an algorithmic monitor happening right now. We finally got a dissent here from Coast Cider 7645 saying that real ID is insufficient voter ID, which is an opinion that I'm fine with. People can have that opinion, but at least I know that some people are getting through, or some bots are getting through, or something. So I'm awfully.
I think it's just because I'm that good, Matt. They just agree.
Yeah, everyone's on the same page. But that's the thing, right? Is that everyone's on the same page. This is not a what pollsters or like highfalutin political scientists would call a valence issue. This does not divide people. People fundamentally agree about all this, and yet you're fighting an uphill battle. Let me ask this about End Citizens United specifically. There's a great classic bit on The Simpsons where the character Apu, who's now kind of semi-canceled for good reason, is trying to become an American citizen and is asked as part of the citizenship test, what caused the Civil War? And he says, well, there were numerous factors from anti-abolitionists versus abolitionists to economic factors. And the tester just says, just slavery, just say slavery. So it seems like sometimes there is a cut through answer that covers everything. I went through a long dot connection exercise in the open where I suggested that there are a number of forces coming together to cause this conflagration of political power that's being concentrated in the ultra wealthy. Does this just come down to Citizens United? Like, is that really what lit the match here, or are there other factors?
I mean, there are always other factors that go into it, but the biggest one is just, yes, money. It is money in politics. It is what is going to help someone run their campaign and get reelected. And that is often that the person with more money or more money being spent on their behalf wins the election. And so sadly, what we see is that it really is as simple as money pouring into these campaigns. And I mean, you talked about it in the opening, right? Like you were talking about how these billionaires give money. They're now giving up to 20% of the total election spending, which was $3 billion in 2024. Those are huge amounts. And then they get this massive tax break. And so it's an easy return on investment for them. They get much more money in their pocket, and then they turn around and pour that into other races so that they can either have things like mergers be approved or investigations be dropped or regulations be changed to to help drive up their profit. Everything becomes about greed and lining pockets and money into their pockets. So, look, here's what I will say though. Money can often feel all powerful in elections, but it is not. As of this moment, the thing that is still more powerful than money in our elections is our vote. And the people actually can be more powerful than big money. And we've seen it happen, right? If you look at the Wisconsin Supreme Court race just last year, where Elon Musk spent, what, $20 million and was auctioning off votes for $1 million a piece. His side lost that election by 10 points, a huge margin in such a tight state like Wisconsin. And part of it was that just the sheer influence of big money in that race became politically toxic. And I think the more that the people continue to stand up and call out the influence of money like this, the influence that it's having over elected officials or candidates, the more that that can influence their vote at the ballot box, and the more that people will actually start to have a different equation about whether or not that's the best outcome for their election results. Because remember, that they are all pretty self-centered. They all want to get reelected or they all want to get elected. So the thing more powerful than the money is actually our vote.
I want to do a couple of quick things here, and I'm going to do the Matt Robison version of the weave, which is like Trump's version of the weave, except sane and coherent. First, I do want to address a couple of comments that have come up in the chat in response to things I've said. First of all, some of the dissenters have clarified. First of all, Coastsider 7645 says, I'm real. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to bot you. You're not a bot. And 100% agree, no voter ID. All right. Okay, cool. Got it. Second, a frequent commenter here, who is also a frequent dissenter, Jason Beatrice says, I'm always here. I just don't agree with most of you. Democrats said no ICE in schools, hospital, churches, and polling areas. And that led to an interesting exchange about whether ICE has business at polling stations. There's some disagreement about that I'm splashing up on the screen. Suffice it to say that in the next part of my weave, I'm going to connect the dots here to the discussion about the SAVE Act, voter ID, and I have some notes. I actually wrote a whole Newsweek article about this last week. I have not talked about it yet because we're going to feature it as part of the Political Rehab show this Friday. So I hope that everyone who has not yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, just launched recently, worth knowing, will please do so. Catch that channel. I have a video explainer on it, and I have criticism for both Republicans and Democrats as part of the voter ID, real ID, SAVE Act discussion. And finally, oh boy, I am actually going to land this plane. I can't believe it. You were talking before about some of these instances of outsized influence for wealthy folks in elections. You've been at this for a decade. Give me a story. Give me the most blatant story or example that you remember of big money influence, corporate or individual, on a campaign or on our government.
Oh, Matt, that's so hard. I mean, there's
you're like a lioness looking at a herd of zebra, and all you're seeing is stripes. There are too many examples, and I didn't even prep you on this. This is a gotcha question.
Gotcha question. Okay. I mean, let's take Elon Musk, right? Like, I think it's a really good example. So Elon
filling out pre-populated voter registration cards. That one.
I was actually going to say, how about in 2024, Elon Musk spent $280 million to basically run a super PAC that was the ground game for the Trump campaign, and then was rewarded with, to your point in your opener, this made up a government job of overseeing Doge and supposedly being brought on to cut waste and abuse in our government, but really just given kind of carte blanche access to destroy any program that he wanted to. But let's look behind the scenes and see what else was happening. So he gives $280 million. He's rewarded with all of this unfettered access and power. And then what happens? But his companies actually get more no bid contracts to the tunes of billions of dollars from our government, right? And it is just, and now you see, despite all the like tit for tat that played out publicly between him and Trump, he has already started spending for the 2026 midterms. He just put $10 million into another super PAC for the 2026 midterms because he knows that his gravy train is directly connected to Trump and the Republican majority right now, right? So I think that that is a particularly good one because we all watched it play out in real time. You could look at pharma during the big negotiation in the Biden administration when we were trying to actually get prescription drugs to be able to be negotiated. And they were spending so much money, not just to influence Republicans, but honestly to influence Democrats as well, that we were only able to get 10 prescription drugs to be negotiated. 10. We pay the most of anywhere in the world. And again, pharmaceutical companies are making massive, massive profits, the biggest profits they've ever made. So there's another one. But you see it play out in small ways too. I remember when I was the chief of staff on the Hill, I'll give two examples real quick. One was I'm going to pick on the poor sugar beet producers. Sugar beets are great, but they have a vested interest in keeping the sugar subsidy in the Farm Bill. And so one of the things they did was they actually would come and meet with people and then separately, of course, give them a $5,000 PAC check. And so one of the newer Democratic members had met with them, had a great conversation, and then had gotten this money, but then voted against the sugar subsidy in the Farm Bill. And they called and they were like, "What are you doing? We came and we met with you and we gave you this money and then you voted the wrong way." And he was like, "Oh no, that is definitely not how this works. You can take your money back. And by the way, I'm no longer taking any of this kind of money because that's the pay to play politics. That is the legalized corruption that this town runs on day in and day out." So those are just a few examples. There are so many more.
Yeah, I want to co-sign that last one. And I'm going to necessarily give an example here that I think is dated. Because I'm dated and,
I think we decided we both were on this, right?
Okay, fair. It's a race to the bottom. But I want to do it intentionally because I think the situation has gotten so much worse. As you say, there is kind of an open trade. Actually, for one thing, I urge people out there, it's free on YouTube. You can go watch the Eddie Murphy movie, The Distinguished Gentleman, anytime you want. I have on the Beyond Politics podcast, I have actually hosted the writer and producer of that movie. And I've taken him scene by scene. I'm telling you, as a former chief of staff, and Tiffany, I invite you to disagree with me, but you're wrong. This is the most accurate depiction of the reality of what actually happens on Capitol Hill that has ever been set on celluloid. It is stunningly accurate. And one of the things that it lays out is there's a lobbyist meeting with a fictional congressman, Eddie Murphy, saying, "Where do you stand on sugar subsidies?" And he says, "I don't know. Where should I stand?" And the lobbyist says, "Doesn't matter to me. If you are for them, then I have money for you from the beet producers. If you're against them, I have money for you from the candy manufacturers. It doesn't really matter from the standpoint of the fundraising. But one of your functions as chief of staff, just to be very real about this, and I'm not proud of it, is if you work for a member in a swing district who's going to have a tough reelection campaign, which I exclusively did in my decade on the Hill. I only worked for swing district members. Part of your function is to keep your head the fuck down. You are trying to not draw the ire of the big money groups who could absolutely destroy you and make the margin of difference in your boss's next race. You are sort of committing political malpractice to do anything otherwise. And so you think through these kinds of questions very, very carefully. If you're going to take a position on something, it's your job as the chief political officer for your boss to at least be aware of the landscape and know where does the money line up. I'm not saying it drives all decisions, but that's your job, is to point that out to your boss and to say, look, when you do this vote, it's quite possible that the candy manufacturers have a pack and they're going to come after you. Now, why is this example dated? Because it's so quaint to worry about the $5,000 PAC check, the $10,000 double max PAC check that could be coming at you for getting on the wrong side of an issue. Nowadays, with super PACs, you could be talking about the $100,000 spending, the $1 million spending. You could be in a congressional district where the ad rates are so low that a super PAC or a billionaire could easily drop a money bomb on you that just ends your boss's career. And if you don't make them aware of that in advance, it's your fault. So all of this is to say that I think the situation that I encountered and you slightly more recently encountered in your role as a chief of staff has gotten so much worse. After subjecting you to that long soliloquy, let me turn it into a question. Is this retrievable? Have we gone past a tipping point where we can do anything about this? Or is the grip, is the malignancy so far spread that we're doomed? And I know that institutionally, as the head of End Citizens United, you can't say we're doomed because your job is to undoom us. But what do you think?
Well, I wouldn't be in this job if I didn't have hope, right? And it is, we are up against a mountain, right? A mountain of money, a mountain of corruption, sometimes that mountain of despair about what we are seeing in our country. But I absolutely believe that there is hope, and there is both short-term and long-term hope. I mean, first of all, short-term, we need people in office who are going to pass meaningful reforms as soon as they are in office. And there's a lot of stuff we could do with a simple vote of Congress tomorrow. But right now, this Congress lacks the political will and spine to actually get this done. So some examples. We could have full disclosure and transparency in our election spending. And what we've seen in states that have passed disclosure and transparency is that actually some of that money starts to get out of the system. More importantly, we can actually figure out who's trying to influence the voters, and you can hold them accountable, and you can make sure voters know who's trying to buy these elections. It is one of the most important tools in our anti-corruption toolbox. But right now there's so much dark money that we actually don't even know where all the spending is coming from. But with a simple vote of Congress, we could actually get that done tomorrow. We could make sure there was a real cop on the beat. We could reform the Federal Elections Commission, which currently is inoperable. We could make sure that there was actually an agency that was investigating these issues and holding people accountable for breaking the law. We could stop coordination between super PACs and candidates. There is a ton we could do tomorrow. But a couple of things have to happen. Number one, we have to have the right people in office. So you have to have candidates who understand how this issue ties with every other important issue, who is willing to go out on a limb and actually put this front and center, and who is running on it and really talking to voters about it. And so we have a campaign called Unrig Washington. There are 173 candidates currently on board. You can go to unrigwashington.org and learn all about them. And look, it's three simple things. They agree to ban stock trading by members of Congress, because if you are a member of Congress, you shouldn't be lining your own pocket with insider information. You agree not to take corporate PAC money, because again, corporate PACs have way too big of a seat at the table every single day, and the voters deserve to know that you are working for them. And three, you agree to end the dark money in our politics, the undisclosed money. So that's it. Three simple common sense things. And go to Unrig Washington to learn more. So that's short term. Get the right people elected, pass the right laws. Long term, we need to reform the Supreme Court, and they either need to reverse themselves or we need to pass a constitutional amendment. Those are big, big things. But look, we have seen that the American people want there to be reforms for the Supreme Court. They understand that right now the Supreme Court is actually acting like a wing of a political party rather than the highest court in the land. They also understand that we need to overturn Citizens United. So over 20 states have already passed ballot measures that instruct their members of Congress to do everything possible to overturn Citizens United. So we need to just keep going and keep building that movement. we're proud to be people powered. We have 4 million members across the country. We're going to just keep growing and keep bringing people into this fight because we've seen this before in our country's history. I believe in our country's ability to get big things like this done.
I'm going to, at the risk of being an absolutely awful host, like the pits, the worst, I'm going to push you a little bit.
All right, let's do it.
I wonder if all of that, as Lefty Gramps said, a simple act of Congress is a fallacy in the 21st century. Touche, Lefty. I also will point out that we have an actual member of the Supreme Court who is openly purchased by billionaires, like yacht trips, plane trips, new RVs out the wazoo. It does not leave me with a ton of hope for the very sensible, smart, expedient actions that you just laid out. Might the solution not simply be, for the time being, we have to fight fire with fire? Might it not be? I mean, I alluded before to kind of the kids' table version of this that I encountered 15 years ago, where it's like, well, you're going to take a side in this, so you're going to get a PAC check cut against you. So you need to make sure that you get a PAC check cut for you. So their $5,000 will kind of cancel out your $5,000. Isn't there a thermonuclear weapon version of this in the age of super PACs and billionaires, where it's like, maybe our billionaires need to line up against their billionaires. Maybe what we need is a massive super PAC fund or a massive agreement of this, the Democracy Alliance. If anyone goes after any of our pro-reform people, we're going to go after them with just as much money firepower. I just wonder, is that the only thing, or am I just descending into the mud and you find me deplorable?
Nope, I don't find you deplorable. But can I say perhaps a little naive?
Aha! Okay, no, hit me.
I mean, that's essentially the game that we've been playing for the last 10
And we're
years.
losing.
And we're losing. And we're losing badly.
That's fair.
The billionaire money is going to Republicans. They are getting 5 times more of the money than we are on the Democratic side. So, and we are trying to play this game. It's not like people on the Democratic side and then the establishment are leaving money on the table because they want to feel good about themselves. That is not happening. We are actively going out and trying to get all the money that we possibly can. And we are losing the billionaire money by 5 times, right? So we can continue to play the arms race, but we are losing it.
I am reminded of the movie The Right Stuff, where they wonder openly at the Soviet Sputnik launch, well, could it be that their Germans helped them? And the American response is, no, our Germans are better than their Germans. And what you're saying is their billionaires are better than our billionaires. Fair enough.
And look, billionaires are self-interested. They want lower taxes and they want less regulation and they want to be able to line their own pockets more. And right now, the Republicans, that is their agenda. So, of course, it makes more sense that they get more of the money. Here's the other thing. The Democratic Party has put front and center these kind of reform efforts since 2018. These have been kind of like priority number 1 for the Democratic Party. And we were, we passed it through the House 5 different times. We had every single Democratic member of the Senate on board as a co-sponsor. We were so close to actually getting some of this passed that I refuse to give up. We have not always passed big pieces of legislation on the first try in this country. The Voting Rights Act, for instance, took 4 different times before it finally passed. So I am not going to give up. That is part of my role. And also, I just don't think that the continued arms race is actually getting us to a win.
Listen, as a communications professional, I have to advise you not to say that you're going to give up in this fight. It's just not good for the organization that you lead so ably. In terms of the federal level, I don't know. I'm tempted. I'm tempted to go down the path of further doom scrolling here, and I think I'm going to indulge myself. I think I'm going to go there. I'm going to bum myself out for just a minute. You lift me up, okay?
I'll do my best.
As longtime viewers know, including in conversations with former Ohio Dem Party Chairman David Pepper and many others, I'm a firm believer that
we all love David Pepper.
Everyone loves David Pepper.
Yeah, just give a shout out.
Yeah, look, I even bought his fiction book. It's about a freaking voter file. Okay, look, I mean that's some host dedication here. You got a book? I'm a good customer.
I don't have a book, but
all right,
I'll work on it. That's next.
Well, there you go. Maybe you should write a high stakes fiction caper about ending Citizens United. Yeah, you heard it here first. Copyright. I'm more worried in a way about the state and local level than the federal level, because at the federal level, there's so much going on and there's so much money sloshing around the system. I think it's been relatively definitively shown by political scientists that there are diminishing marginal returns in high profile races to more money, more campaign ads, more billionaire skullduggery. There's much less of that at the state and local level. When the races are smaller, your dollar goes a lot further in bending the outcome. And I'm super concerned about that. I think the New York Times expose made me even more concerned. Do you agree? Are you more concerned about the state and local level?
I am concerned about all of it. But yeah, I actually do agree with you. I think that there are also, by the way, nice use of the word skullduggery. Like, how often do you actually get to pull that one out? That was
you know what? My Newsweek editors have kind of blacklisted because I use skullduggery. I use gobsmacked. There's a few Robisonisms. Yeah, I go to that well too much. My poor wife is like so sick of my like 10 favorite words. Anyway, go on, please.
But we have absolutely seen this play out in states across the country, right? And I don't know. You were talking about Ohio. Let's talk about Ohio, right? We saw the entire First Energy campaign scandal and how First Energy was getting rate increases while also basically buying off the entire legislature and right, like the full circle of money that was going on. In Pennsylvania, you saw, Wall Street giant Jeff Yass donate more than $100 million to campaigns in 2024. And he was responsible for almost 90% of the fundraising for the Republican Attorney General candidate, who is overseeing the investigation at TikTok. Jeff Yass is a major investor in TikTok, right? Michigan, I'll pick on a blue state for a minute. You have seen both United and Blue Cross Blue Shield join forces to stop bills that would actually increase access to mental health care in the state because they know it would cost them money. In North Carolina or in Virginia, you see energy companies having way too big of a footprint. We can keep going, right? Like we can just kind of keep going down the list. Nevada, you have the hotel titan Robert Bigelow, who spent $25 million to elect the Republican governor, Joe Lombardo, who then vetoed measures that were all about protecting tenants from eviction because he opposed those measures because he wanted to be able to buy them up and have more property. So we see this in states. It's even harder to combat in the states. And it's sometimes it goes under the radar in the states how much the money is influencing the outcome. So I don't disagree with your analysis.
I used to quietly say, I again, longtime viewers know that I had a very odd career trajectory where I worked in Congress and then I worked at the state legislative level. And I used to tell all the lobbyists in the New Hampshire legislature, which famously has 400 members of the state house, they make $100 a year. The state senators make $100 a year. It's like, I don't know, somehow the state does pretty well. I don't understand. But I used to tell people, it's like, you don't understand how easy it would be to just buy this whole legislature for nothing. To buy, like these state house members spend like $5,000 or $10,000 on their election. You get an absolute majority out of 200 of them. Like this is cheap. This is not hard. And I think you've seen like some of the worst things, and I've written about this in Newsweek, some of the worst things you've seen happen at the state level in the last decade are sort of the unregulated, untrammeled legalization of gambling in our pockets, cannabis on every street corner. Why? Because there is a slosh of big money that's going into very small races, and it just has this cascading effect. And before you know it, we have de facto legalization of our most dangerous vices. So now I sound moralistic and holier than thou, and I don't mean to. I like to gamble occasionally, whatever. But this is essentially the upshot of all this.
Well,
all right.
and
Go,
talk about gambling, right? We now have these prediction markets that are completely unregulated. And I don't know if you have followed this, but like my understanding, and I don't dabble, but you can bet on
Can I guess where you're going? Can we do like 5 seconds of telepathy? Okay. We've not prepared this. We've not prepared this, right? Okay. I think what you're about to say is when Trump rode the roller coaster yesterday of oil prices going to 120 and then announcing that the war was going to be over very soon, and then they crashed to $90, that someone, an insider, knew he was going to say that and cashed in by speculating on oil prices. Am I wrong? Maybe I'm wrong.
I was actually going to say that someone made a heck of a lot of money by guessing when Nicolas Maduro was going to be captured, and they made a heck of a lot of money by guessing when the bombs were going to drop in Iran. And like, I mean, these are insiders in the administration making tens of thousands of dollars on these prediction markets with insider information because it's all completely unregulated. So yes, there's also like that kind of insider trading happening and the stock trades that we see. But these prediction markets also are things like, well, I think Nicolas Maduro is going to be captured on a Tuesday at 7 p.m. And if I guess right by chance, I just happen to get $46,000 or something like that. And this is the kind of like manipulation and corruption we're seeing happen on a daily basis now.
First of all, I almost never disagree with our frequent commenter, Amethyst Peony, who is a total gem. I do beg to differ with you, my friend, on the contention that cannabis is not dangerous. Again, I don't mean to sound like a square man, but I wrote a whole Newsweek piece about this. I have a whole video about it. I'm going to pop it into the chat at some point here. I would like to submit my, a few facts on this. And you could disagree with me. Wow, that actually did. I was going to successfully pull off. My weave is back. I was going to say, viewers who were part of the discussion I had with my old Capitol Hill friend, Ann Kim, who wrote the insanely amazing book, Poverty for Profit, about the big corporations that are making stacks of money off of implementing programs for poor people in America. There is a direct line between that conversation and this conversation. And it doesn't have to just be about legalizing vices and cannabis and gambling. It's far more pedestrian things that we don't think about, like dialysis services and pawn services and all kinds of programs that your tax dollars and my tax dollars pay for, and these corporations make unbelievable profits out of, and they do them terribly, and the services are not good, and they're never ever booted, they're never ever audited. Why? Because they've completely captured the government. Again, I'm not pretending that government capture by corporate forces is something new. I'm just, to bring this full circle, saying that this is at a level and at a brazenness and an openness out in plain sight that we've never seen, which really does lead me to the fear that things have just gone so far that the genie can't be put back in the bottle. But you do tell me that if we can avoid a Trump 3.0 with a successor in 2029. And if we can, I hate to say it, but get a Democratic majority back in Congress, we could do something about this.
Yes.
So let me ask you this. We had one of those a few
Yes.
years ago. I wrote in Alternate and Raw Story that I would be willing to, and in fact would insist on blowing up the filibuster to pass what became HR 1.
That's right.
What became, kind of our last ditch attempt. That attempt floundered. I had some notes on it. I thought maybe it became a little bit too much of a Christmas tree. I know you were involved with that. Do you think we will be more successful next time? Do you think we can actually, if we get the syzygy to line up again of the presidency and the House and the Senate and enough reform-minded members of Congress, can we actually do this? Can we pass a cleaner version, a better version of what we tried to do 5 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought this up. I mean, this is part of what I was talking about a few minutes ago. We were so close to passing that, right? And it had started with electing a wave of reformers in 2018. And then we took back the House, obviously in 2018. We passed HR 1 through the House in 2019. It went to Mitch McConnell's Senate and died. We had to flip the Senate in 2020. We obviously had to flip the White House in 2020 to end up with this opportunity to try to pass what was then the For the People Act and became the Freedom to Vote Act. And we passed it again, another 4 times through the House. We had every Democratic senator lined up in support of it. But Sinema and Manchin refused to change the filibuster rules in order to actually allow that vote to happen. So one, I think that we are in a different position now than we were then. One, the Senate makeup is different. Both Sinema and Manchin aren't in the Senate. But number two, we are seeing these we are seeing corruption and attacks on the foundations of our democracy that I think shock even all of us that were paying close attention and understood what was at risk in 2020 or even after January 6, 2021. So I actually think that it is going to be an even more urgent and critical need to be able to pass this. Remember, we were coming out of a pandemic. We also needed to do the Inflation Reduction Act, right? Like there were so many big things that our country was facing at that point in time. I think that the threats to the foundations of our democracy, we are seeing that in very real time. And I think that there is a concerted understanding about that we really need to go address and shore up those guardrails of our democracy. So yes, but we have to do the hard work to get there, right? Like we can't just leave it to chance. And that is the piece that we are working on day in and day out, is to actually set it up to where we make sure that we are creating both the momentum and that we have the right people in office to get this done when we have the chance.
All right. Well, I will say, because there's an active conversation going on about cannabis in the chat right now, I will definitely get back into that with anyone who's interested at a future time. I am ears wide open for other perspectives on that, including the always incisive observations from Amethyst Peony. Let me get you out of here on this. People have made much of the capture of Nicolas Maduro as an unprecedented taking of a foreign leader. But I would argue that the greatest capture of a foreign leader was Emma Hayes. What do you think about the upcoming prospects for U.S. domination, both in the men's and then the ensuing Women's World Cup? I know you're a soccer fan.
I love that this is what we're ending on. This is amazing.
Yes.
Look, there is nobody better than Emma Hayes, and the U.S. women's soccer team is in such good hands. And the talent, I mean, we started going to the Women's World Cup in 2011 and have been to every Women's World Cup since, and are raising our daughter up right by taking her to all the Women's World Cups. The U.S. is the team to beat in Brazil in 2027. You heard it here. I think that we are going to absolutely be gelling and have the chemistry, and we have such incredible young talent on the team. It is also hard to see kind of the passing of like the team that I first kind of was so passionate about, and all the folks that have retired, and so many of my sheroes. But it's incredible to see the foundation that they leave for so many young women, and the growth of the sport is just incredible, right? And here in DC, the Washington Spirit games are incredibly amazing to go to. And so, if folks haven't been, turn out, support Washington Spirit or whatever team you are closest to. And yeah, you heard it here. We're gonna get that. We're gonna get that next star on our shield. We are
I
ready.
believe you. I believe you. And I have a mea culpa for people. I have been a U.S. men's national team fan for 30 years. I have gone to countless in-person matches. I actually, in 1995, like there were people abandoning cars on the side of the road because, of course, when we play people from other countries, they care. We don't.
They care a lot.
But so I will go ahead and admit that my first focus is USMNT for the time being, because, that's what's on our plates right now. But then after that, I am looking forward to turning my focus and getting revved up for the WNT. And I will say, as a former coach of my daughter's soccer team, I am thrilled and amazed at the upswing in the game, the interest in young female athletes. And the only thing I'll say out there, if any of this has vibed for you and you are perhaps a young female athlete, FIFA has done exactly one thing right in all of its existence. It created the FIFA 11 Plus program for ACL tear prevention in young female athletes. I implore you, check it out. It is so effective. We don't have to have the scourge of ACL tears in girls that we are currently seeing. It's preventable. It's avoidable. So do that and stay away from cannabis, whatever Amethyst says. My goodness. Yeah. Okay. Lefty, listen, I'm not a cannabis hater. I just, I have some stats that disturb me, but we'll get into that another time. Tiffany, absolutely delightful to have you on the show. I really appreciate it. And looking forward to having you back eventually, someday, when we're finally going to talk about reefer madness, when we talk about billionaire madness. I'm looking forward to getting there with you.
Well, as am I. I'm happy to come back anytime. Thanks so much for having me on. And if anyone wants to check us out, you can go to endcitizensunited.org and please come join the fight.
Absolutely. And I'm splashing that up on the screen. They do take donations, folks. And I know there's a little irony in that, but goodness knows it is worthwhile and a very, very worthy cause. And I will say, as I kind of promoted earlier, we do have a new episode of the Political Rehab Show coming up on Friday. So for all those who haven't subscribed yet, please do. Worth knowing on YouTube. And in the meantime, whether it's this Friday, next week on the live stream, we might have the ProPublica reporters on next week to talk about their deep dive into that database of Trump admin people. So I hope people will hang on for that. In the meantime, stay safe, be well. We'll see y'all soon.